Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and in today's video we are gonna do the summary of an anime called as Monster. We are gonna cover all the 74 episodes of Monster anime series in this video. So it's gonna be a really long video, so sit tight and watch this video till the end. The story starts off with Dr. Kenzo Tenma, who is the head of neurosurgery at the Eisler Memorial Hospital in Düsseldorf, who carries out a successful neurosurgery on a famous opera singer. But the hospital director Udo Heienmann takes the credit during a press conference. Later, Dr. Tenma is saddened when he discovers that an operation on a Turkish construction worker was given a lower priority at that time, and subsequently he died because of it. And his widow is blaming him for not operating on him. When out with director Heienmann's daughter Eva, he states that Turkish construction worker died because Dr. Baker took too long treating him. She comments that not all people are equal. Many days later, Dr. Tenma is called in to remove a bullet from the head of a little boy. His name is Johan or Johan, however you pronounce it, who is the adopted son of Mr. and Mrs. Liebert, who were shot dead in their home. His twin sister Anna is also admitted, apparently in a state of severe shock with post-traumatic amnesia, muttering the words, "Kill him." When Dr. Tenma is about to start the operation, he is called away by Chief of Surgery Dr. Oppenheim on phone-based instruction from Director Heienmann to start surgery on Mayor Roedecker, who had previously committed a large amount of fund to the hospital. When Tenma states to Heienmann that he is only one who can operate on Johan this time and to have Dr. Boyer handle the mayor, Heienmann advises Tenma to do the job as Mayor Roedecker is going to review Eisler Memorial Hospital next month. Due to his conscience, Tenma decides to go against Heienmann's orders and operate on the small boy. Dr. Tenma is able to save Johan's life successfully, but Mayor Roedecker dies during surgery under Dr. Boyer. He and Dr. Oppenheim scold Dr. Tenma, stating that the doctors had to scramble to cover up for him at the last minute, resulting in Mayor Roedecker's death. Dr. Oppenheim has forwarded his report to the director. As a news report states that the flowers were left at the city hall and a decision for the new mayor is taking place, Director Heienmann states in a press conference that Mayor Roedecker died of a cerebral infraction and that they did their best to save his life. Later at the hospital banquet, while apologizing to Director Heienmann, Dr. Tenma is shocked when Dr. Boyer is revealed to be the new head of neurosurgery. Despite forgiving Tenma, Director Heienmann allows him to keep his job and states that he won't accept his papers for the next health summit, nor recommend him in the events of a transfer. To make matters worse, as Tenma leaves, Eva Heienmann callously breaks off their engagement, dropping her ring at his feet. Dr. Tenma confesses at the bedside of the apparently unconscious Johan that he wished that Director Heienmann was dead. Meanwhile, a detective from the agency, which is named as Weisbach, tries to get Anna Liebert to remember her name and the events of the night her parents died. Director Heienmann suggests to Dr. Boyer and Dr. Oppenheim providing photographs of the Liebert twins to the media in order to play on public sympathy and garner attention to the hospital. He casually offers the other doctors candies donated to the sick children and orders Oppenheim to reassign Boyer as Johan's attending physician. There was a brief argument between Tenma and Boyer about his photographic action, as Boyer states to Tenma that he served his purpose with the boy. Some nights later, a nurse discovers Dr. Oppenheim and Dr. Boyer dead inside their offices, while Eva finds her father dead inside his study room. The police arrives at Dr. Tenma's apartment and informs him that Dr. Heienmann, Dr. Oppenheim and Dr. Boyer were found dead. When Dr. Tenma returns to the hospital, he also learns that the Liebert twins have disappeared. Following Director Heienmann's funeral, Dr. Tenma is informed by Inspector Egon Weisbach and Inspector Heinrich Lunge of the BKA that the dead men were poisoned by candy containing a muscle relaxant, and Lunge suspects that Dr. Tenma may be involved. Because of all these events, Tenma considers returning to Japan. But with the vacuum created by the 3 deaths and another doctor transferring to another location, Dr. Tenma is promoted to the chief of surgery at this hospital. Because of this, Dr. Tenma cancels the plan of Japan and stays over there. After learning that Tenma is promoted to chief of surgery again, Eva attempts to reconcile with Dr. Tenma, but he rebuffs her. 9 years later, Dr. Tenma has become highly successful as the chief of surgery and continues to operate on difficult cases while training other surgeons. When Adolf Junkers, a known criminal lockpicker, is hit by a car while running in fear, Dr. Tenma is called in to operate on him. Dr. Tenma again encounters Inspector Lunge, who is investigating the criminal's involvement in a series of mysterious murders of wealthy middle-aged couples in their homes. After the operation, Tenma attempts to talk to Junkers, who says only one thing: the monster is coming. Inspector Lunge questions Junkers about his involvement in the homicides, but he becomes hysterical when Lunge asks him who hired him. Dr. Tenma convinces Junkers to overcome his fears and confess his involvement. However, that night, Junkers finds his police guard dead, and because of it, he flees from the hospital. Soon after, Dr. Tenma also finds the dead guard, poisoned by candy in the same manner as the hospital officials from 9 years ago. He follows Junkers into the nearby construction site and finds him with Johan Liebert, whose life Dr. Tenma saved 9 years ago. Junkers explains that Johan hired him and his associates, whom he has since killed, and is preparing to execute Junkers too. Johan reveals that his real name is not Liebert and admits that he was the one who poisoned the hospital officials 9 years ago and the policeman who is dead inside the hospital right now. Johan calmly takes out his gun and executes Junkers and walks away, leaving Dr. Tenma distraught at Johan's lack of respect for humans' life. Later, Dr. Tenma explains everything to Inspector Lunge, who finds Dr. Tenma's involvement in these events suspicious. The scene then suddenly gets shifted to another unknown city where a girl named Nina Fortner lives, who is a bright university student studying law at the University of Heidelberg. She is seeing a counselor regarding strange dreams and has no memories of her life before the age of 10. She begins receiving poetic emails from an unknown person and decides to meet them. One day in a lecture class, she is overcome by fear and nausea at the mention of the family massacre. Meanwhile, Dr. Tenma is investigating the serial murders of a middle-aged childless couple and is searching for information on Michael Rechman, which he believes was Johan's real name. He encounters an old blind man who befriended a boy called Franz, who said that Dr. Tenma saved his life many years ago. The boy had an abiding interest in war stories, particularly those involving extreme fear, and said that he would meet his twin sister when she turns 20 in Heidelberg. On the other side, as Nina leaves to meet the unknown person, her parents prepare to tell her that she was adopted. At the arranged place, she sees Johan nearby and he seems familiar. Then she suddenly faints and falls on the ground. With the help of Maurer, a local newspaper journalist, Dr. Tenma is able to track down the Fortners on the day of the twins' 20th birthday. The Fortners refuses to talk about the missing twin boy, but reveals that Nina has left to meet the mysterious stranger at the Heidelberg castle. Dr. Tenma immediately drives to the castle, where he saves Nina from the hired thug and takes her back home, trying to explain that she is Anna Liebert. Meanwhile, the thug, tied up with Tenma's necktie, fearfully meets his employer. Dr. Tenma and Nina returns to find both the Fortners and the journalist dead. The scene brings Anna's memories flooding back as she says that she shot Johan. Two detectives arrive at the scene and escort Dr. Tenma and Nina away. However, Dr. Tenma becomes suspicious of them and he escapes with Nina. Back in the town, Dr. Tenma finds out that the detectives are authentic and the thug at the castle was found dead. Nina, now aware of her past, slips away from Dr. Tenma. Inspector Lunge examines the scene and finds a necktie that he suspects belonged to Dr. Tenma. Dr. Tenma returns to work at the hospital in Düsseldorf. Meanwhile, Lunch questions Eva, now a 3-time divorcee, about the necktie he found at the murder scene, but she denies ever seeing it. Eva then pleads with Dr. Tenma to take her back, but he refuses. And Eva threatens to turn him over to the Inspector Lunch as she gave the necktie to Dr. Tenma years earlier. With the police on his tail, Dr. Tenma is forced to flee and he recalls the events that have led to this current situation. 5 months later, Dr. Tenma learns that an elderly couple were killed in Verden and that he is the main suspect. 5 months ago, Dr. Tenma began rigorous firearm training with a former army veteran named Hugo, who was also taking care of an angry orphan girl whose mother he shot dead in Myanmar. During his time there, Dr. Tenma creates a new bond between the girl and the veteran, which helps him later on because when Hugo is questioned by Inspector Lunch, he refuses to disclose any information about Dr. Tenma's location. While investigating the murder of the prominent councilman and his wife at the Springer estate in Verden, Tenma encounters the petty criminal Otto Haeckel and escapes with him. Otto Haeckel suggests that they could make good money by operating on wounded criminals, but also reveals that he knows the councilman's killer. They visits the killer instantly, who is remorseful and dubbed by a man called as Enric into committing the murders. But before Tenma can extract any more information, he kills himself. In order to pay his debt, Haeckel arranges for Tenma to be abducted to treat a wounded man who is a suspect in a terrorist attack. Despite being threatened, Tenma decides to save him anyway. While investigating in East Germany, Tenma discovers that Johan was adopted by Lieberts from an orphanage called as 511 Kinderheim, which is now abandoned. He then contacts Hartmann, who is a former district official with the ministry, who explains that the orphanage was an extremely harsh environment for the children, ruled by fear and violence. There, Tenma also encounters a boy under Hartmann's care named Dieter. When Tenma discovers that Dieter's body is covered with bruises, he confronts Hartmann and takes Dieter to the hospital. Tenma then goes to another orphanage where the director tells him that 511 Kinderheim was an East Germany experimental laboratory. Tenma learns that the orphans in the 511 Kinderheim were the part of a project to produce perfect soldiers through psychological reconstructions. However, during a power struggle, the 50 instructors and orphans were killed. After learning all this information about 511 Kinderheim, the scene gets shifted to Hartmann taking Dieter back from the hospital. And when Tenma visits Hartmann's apartment again, he realizes that Hartmann was at 511 Kinderheim and is now trying to reshape Dieter to be similar to Johan. At the ruins of the orphanage, Hartmann explains to Tenma that the battle was triggered by Johan and General Wolf is the key to Johan's origin. Much to Hartmann's surprise, Dieter decides to reject him and leave with Tenma. While leaving with Dieter on a journey to find more information about this Johan Liebert, Tenma treats a local drunk after an accident and then assists Dr. Schumann, the local doctor, in treating the village residents. He visits an elderly woman who refuses to have herself examined, where Tenma realizes that the woman has a subarachnoid hemorrhage. And after learning that, he performs an impromptu operation to save her. Meanwhile, her son, a police officer, threatens to arrest Tenma after discovering that he is wanted for murder. However, Dr. Schumann and the villagers convinces the police officer to let Tenma go, and he leaves with Dieter to continue his quest to find Johan. Meanwhile, on the other side, workaholic Inspector Lunch is busy investigating the case of a dead prostitute and her involvement with the politician, while his wife and pregnant daughter leaves him because he's too much workaholic. When a key suspect in the case apparently commits suicide, Lunch is taken off all the cases, so he decides to focus on catching Tenma. Meanwhile, the heavily alcoholic Eva Heienmann has casual sex with her gardener. But when she realizes that she is completely dissatisfied with her life, she burns her house down in a rage. On the other side, in Frankfurt, Tenma questions the now disgraced former detective Messner over the Heidelberg's murder 10 months ago. Messner mentions the baby, a midget who is part of the right-wing nationalist organization who is looking for Nina. Meanwhile, Nina is trying to find Johan and acting as a prostitute while meeting with the baby at the candy club, but he abducts her and later also captures Tenma. At the baby's mansion, Nina is greeted by Professor Golditz, who explains that he is one of the 4 men seeking the recruit Johan as their leader and Nina is the bet. In the basement, Baby brutally questions Tenma and reveals that they plan to burn down the Turkish portion of the Frankfurt. Nina also hears the same plot from Ice, a Turkish woman held captive in the same mansion. At Baby's mansion, Nina finds Ice dead and then discovers that her captor, Professor Golditz, and all of his men have been murdered. Meanwhile, General Wolfman takes away Tenma and Dieter, who was captured earlier. On the way, Tenma enables Dieter to return to Frankfurt to warn the Turkish community of the plot. Afterwards, Tenma meets Wolf, who accepts his role in the origin of Johan, who he found cold and starving to death with his sister near the Czechoslovakian border during a war. He then says that Johan has killed everyone who was close to him, including Professor Golditz and his men. He then shows Tenma a message from Johan challenging him to meet at the warehouse ruins, then asks help from Tenma to kill Johan. Back in Frankfurt, Dieter and Haeckel are captured by neo-Nazis. Instead of meeting Johan right now, Tenma heads to the Turkish portion of the Frankfurt to warn the residents of the neo-Nazi plot. Meanwhile, Nina confronts Baby while he is having dinner, but he refuses to disclose the location of the planned main fire. Numerous small fires are started, however they are relatively easy to extinguish. Nina finds and rescues Dieter and Haeckel, who says that the main fire will most likely be set near Werfs. At the river, Nina and Dieter finds a neo-Nazi in a chemical warehouse, ready to start the blaze, but Dieter manages to extinguish the fuse by using a vulnerable carpet Haeckel stole from the Turkish store. Later, as Tenma leaves to find Johan, Nina reveals that Johan is not only one person because he has a split personality. Mr. Rosso, the owner of an Italian restaurant where Nina used to work as Anna Liebert, picks her up after questioning by police. She recalls the time she spent working in the restaurant and took marksmanship lessons in the afternoon. When challenged by Nina, Rosso admits that he used to be a professional assassin. She leaves and continues her search for Johan after that. Searching for an insight into Johan's personality, Tenma visits Dr. Rudi Gillen, a fellow student and an academic rival at university who is now a practicing criminal psychoanalyst. Dr. Gillen intends to turn Tenma over to the authorities, but consults with one of his criminal patients in the prison, Peter Jurgens. After the prisoner says that he committed a murder for an unknown person and directs Dr. Gillen on where to find evidence that proves Johan's existence. Dr. Gillen assists Tenma to escape after that while giving him the evidence. Tenma and Dieter after that hitch a ride with an elderly couple on the way to Freiham. Tenma wonders if the couple is trying to turn him in when he realizes that the husband is a suspicious former police officer. He used to think that he could tell a criminal by their looks, but realized that it was not possible after his son committed a murder. The husband confirms that Tenma is a wanted criminal. However, he believes that Tenma is innocent. In Nice, the former detective Mueller, who with Messner killed Nina's foster parents, is newly married right now and enjoying a good life. He hires a private detective to investigate the whereabouts of Tenma, Nina and Messner. But when the detective arrives, he is shot by Mueller's bodyguard Roberto, who is working for Johan. Mueller realizes that he was used to lure Nina into a trap, and Roberto texts Nina promising to take her to Johan despite Roberto's plan to kill Nina. However, Mueller suddenly arrives and rescues her, although he is shot in the process. On the other hand, Lange determines that the murder of a wealthy, middle-aged, childless couple does not fit the usual modus operandi of the serial killer, but uses it as an opportunity to lure Tenma into a trap. He actually suspects the nephew who stands to inherit their estate. Tenma visits the murder scene and also realizes that it is a copycat murder. Over there, Lange catches Tenma in the house, but before Lange can arrest him, he is critically wounded by the nephew, the real criminal. As he lies bleeding, Lange still insists that Johan is the alter ego of Tenma, but when he falls unconscious, Tenma treats his injuries and saves his life. On the other hand, Eva Heinemann is arrested for public drunkenness and is also homeless after not paying her rent. She hooks up with Roberto, whom she was drinking with the night before her arrest. After realizing that she has photos of Johan, Roberto presses her about her link to Johan, and Eva reveals that she saw Johan at the construction site in Düsseldorf on the night Junkers was killed. After learning this information, Roberto prepares to kill her to save Johan's identity. To save her life, Eva offers Roberto the photos of Johan in exchange for information about Tenma's location. Roberto tells her that Tenma is currently treating a wounded mob boss at the country house near Fusen. Roberto and Eva approaches the country house and Roberto kills the bodyguard who just manages to warn his boss before he dies. Roberto doesn't trust Eva and shoots her in the leg. She tells Dieter to run as Tenma would never come to save her. However, Tenma arrives and treats her wounds and then leaves her with the mob boss while he goes to Munich. In Munich, Karl Newman is one of the students who read passages of Latin on Tuesday to the elderly, blind and wealthy Hans-Georg Schuwald. Karl encounters fellow student Lotte Frank, who does housekeeping for Schuwald and whom she is using as the subject for her research paper. Karl agrees to join her in tailing Schuwald when he goes out late in the night. While following him, they discover a woman claiming to be Margot Langer, the mother of his legitimate son, who turns out to be Karl. However, the students who reads on Thursday also claims to be Schuwald's son. After that, Lotte discovers that the Thursday boy is Edmund Farren, and when they go to visit him, they find him dead in his dormitory from an apparent suicide. Later, they encounter Johan Liebert, who has enrolled into their university and is Schuwald's Friday's teacher. Schuwald hires a private investigator named Richard Braun to determine the truth behind Farren's suicide. During a discussion with his psychotherapist Dr. Julius, Braun confirms something is amiss with the death. Meanwhile, Johan offers to help Karl reconcile with his long-lost father, whom he believes to be Schuwald. When Karl and Lotte take Schuwald to visit a lake which is now a construction site, Johan arrives and paints a verbal picture that convinces Schuwald that he is standing on the edge of a beautiful lake. While on the other side, Richard Braun, who is the private investigator hired by Schuwald, tries to reconcile with his ex-wife while dealing with his past alcoholism and again visits Dr. Julius Reichwein and begins to suspect Karl in involvement of Farren's death. Meanwhile, Karl is about to formalize his adoption with his foster parent, but Johan's intervention enables Karl to reconcile with his real father, Schuwald. Schuwald informs Braun that the case involving the suicide of Farren is closed now, but Braun becomes suspicious now that Karl and Johan are caring for Schuwald. Braun decides to review all of his unsolved homicidal cases, but is haunted by the case that caused his alcoholism and error of judgment which caused his dismissal from the police force. His investigation all seems to have a connection with Schuwald, and when he presents his findings to Dr. Reichwein, the doctor also reveals that his friend Dr. Gillen believes that the name Johan is involved in murders aimed at isolating Schuwald. Braun begins to observe Johan and investigate his origin, while Dr. Reichwein asks Gillen to question his criminal patient Peter Jurgens about Johan. Meanwhile, Braun discovers that the real Johan Liebert died at the age of 2. When Dr. Gillen shows a photo of Johan to Jurgens, it triggers a painful memory of his and he promptly commits a suicide in the prison with Dr. Gillen's pen. At night, Johan visits Dr. Braun and manipulates him into a state of deep regret. Johan then offers a bottle of whiskey on the rooftop of a building. Later, Dr. Reichwein is informed that Richard Braun is dead, who again apparently committed suicide by jumping from the top of the building. Dr. Reichwein muses over the death of his friend and patient Richard Braun with Dr. Gillen, who suspects foul play. Dr. Reichwein retraces Braun's last steps and determines his death was not an accident but a murder. But thugs are hired to kill Dr. Reichwein. However, somehow he survives. Later, Roberto attempts to kill Dr. Reichwein at his office, but he is saved by Tenma, who has been shadowing him. He arranges for Tenma to live in a safe house while he and Dr. Gillen attempts to figure out their next steps. However, Tenma leaves the safe house and leaves Dieter with Dr. Reichwein while he tries to track down Johan and purchase a sniper rifle. Lotte has a chance to encounter with the Nina and discovers that they are both researching Schuwald and strikes up a friendship. Later, Lotte realizes that Nina looked like Johan. Tenma prepares to kill Johan at the forest sanctuary but is unable to carry it through after meeting an old soldier who does not want bloodshed in the forest. Some children are dying while participating in a dangerous game of dare suggested by Johan to determine if they were chosen. Dieter manages to convince a seriously injured boy who survives the game not to commit the stunt again. While Schuwald announces a large donation of antique books to the University of Munich and a ceremony to commemorate the donation is planned. At this Munich library, Johan passes out after he looks at the picture book Oblunda by Emil Scourgebay about a monster with no name. Tenma then gets to know about the ceremony which is going to be held at University of Munich and he prepares to kill Johan at the book donation ceremony. On the other hand, Johan recovers from his fainting spell and responds to an invitation to go to visit to Red Heidenberg in the red light district area where there is an apartment of an old prostitute who has been impersonating Karl Newman's mother, Margot Langer. She tries to blackmail Johan but Roberto kills her. Meanwhile, Tenma visits a local doctor to find out about the prostitute's death and finds the teenage daughter of a doctor treating undocumented immigrants. By looking at her condition, he decides to help her treating the waiting patients. In the next scene, Lunch questions Tenma's former friends from Japan to learn more about his suspect, even missing an appointment with his daughter to see his new grandson. However, one of the men has the book Johan was apparently looking at when he fainted, which Lunch examines and translates some of the words. Dr. Reichman confronts the current foster parents of Johan with the fact of his activities and warns them that their lives are in danger, but they refuse to believe him. Tenma sneaks into the library with the rifle at the night before the book donation ceremony. Dr. Reichman confronts Schuwald with evidence about Johan, but Schuwald refuses to take any actions, already suspecting that Johan plans a takeover of his affairs. Later, Reichman realizes that Schuwald is Johan's next target, while Detective Lunch suspects that Schuwald to be the Tenma's next target, and both separately head to library. Lotte confronts Nina at the train station about being the twin sister of Johan after reading the book that made Johan collapse. Nina reads the picture book A Nameless Monster, which triggers some of the Nina's memories too, and she tells Lotte that Johan is her brother. Nina then decides to confront Johan at the book donation ceremony. During this ceremony though, Tenma is unable to kill Johan, and while he delays, he is disarmed by Roberto. However, before Roberto can kill Schuwald, a fire is set by one of the Johan's accomplices, which engulfs the entire library, creating hysteria and fear among the people over there. Tenma manages to grab a handgun and points it towards Roberto, and a shot is heard. Okay, so I think we should stop here right now. I know that I'm stopping the video at the most interesting moment from the series, but as we have already completed the recap of 37 episodes and the video is already longer than 25 minutes, we will continue the recap of the rest of the series in the part 2 of Monster Anime Summary, which I will post in few upcoming days. So that's for the part 1 of the Monster Anime Summary guys, and if you enjoyed this video then let me know about your thoughts on this video in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed this video then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I post daily anime content about top 10 top 5 listings, anime reviews, recommendations, news theories and all sorts of anime content on daily basis. So if you enjoyed, please subscribe, and that was it, and I will see you in the next one. Sayonara.